Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to be talking about the Albatwitch of Pennsylvania. But before we get into that, a couple of plugs. First, you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca, and our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and on our Patreon. We get ad-free early episodes available there and some other cool exclusive content. You can also send us an email, cryptidclues@gmail.com, if you have any questions, just want to say hi. But without further ado, let's get into this. So, Pennsylvania, out in Lancaster County, in the town of Columbia, there's a local cryptid that has been making itself more known over the recent years. Now, the Albatwitch has been appearing, dating back to over 500 years of the, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, I apologize, always, my pronunciation is not always the best, Susquehannock Indians. They inhabited this area around Chickies Rock on the eastern shoreline of Susquehanna. Now, these ape-like creatures are often described as being a miniature Bigfoot, and the Susquehannocks used to actually depict these ape-like creatures on their war shields, but it's a topic of discussion for if that actually is inspiration from this cryptid or if it was just another form of intimidation just for battle. But most sightings of the Albatwitch report a very slender 4 to 5 foot tall ape-like creature covered in reddish brown hair. Not limited to that, gray and black hair has been reported as well. It is important to note, however, that this cryptid isn't a juvenile Sasquatch, but its own type of variant creature. The Albatwitch has more of a neck with a skinnier human-like proportion. They're noted for hanging out in trees and stealing apples, and then even throwing the fruit or usually the pit or the core of the apple back at people that might get a little bit too close to them. Being prominently featured in Susquehannock history, they were also told in tales by the Algonquin people. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. They basically reference small hairy hominid creatures to which they called themselves Megemu Wissus. I hope I'm saying that as well correctly again. That's Megumoowessos. So the name Albatwitch itself is believed to derive from a Pennsylvania Dutch English word that references apple snitch. And if we want to go a step further in German origin, that can actually refer to apple elf. Now, legends of this cryptid say that it used to terrorize picnickers at the Chickies Rock back in the 1800s by stealing their apples and tossing the cores back at them, like I mentioned. And it's worth noting this cryptid's association with stealing apples is more of a recent thing with a European component. The Albatwitch garnered more of a reputation in the late 1800s when, again, like I mentioned prior, it was just becoming more interested in this more prominent picnic spot for little traveling and families and individuals. So people claim, however, these creatures, not singularly speaking, of course, would just appear out of the trees. And if we look at some more modern cases from the 1980s, one of these creatures came eye to eye with a man and actually pinned him to a tree. This man's nearby brother yelled at him and the creature ran off. Other reports have placed this creature walking, on its own 2 feet, just like any other Bigfoot would, yet again near the Chickies Rock, out in the open on the roadway with glowing yellow eyes. Now, if you've listened to the previous episodes that me and Reuben have dived into, we often like to talk about the appearances of your average Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and eyes are always a very big component of interest. They're either black beady eyes, glowing red, or even yellow at times. So aside from similar physical attributes, the eyes seems to be a similar thing not only with hairy hominids, but other cryptids too. But that's a case for another day. Nearby areas of Lancaster, North Anvil, and even the neighboring county of York have all shared sightings and encounters of small 4 to 5 tall hairy hominids. But what do we really know about this location of origin? Now, the town of Columbia is in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, United States, running alongside the Susquehanna River, which is 12 miles west of Lancaster. And fun fact, It was even one of the places considered in 1790 by Congress for the site of the permanent U.S. Capitol. The Susquehanna River is one of the largest rivers of the eastern seaboard of the United States. It rises up in the Otsego Lake, central New York State, and winds through the Appalachian Plateau in New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland before flowing into the head of Chesapeake Bay. This river is about 444 miles long. The animals that reside in this county range from cows, goats, sheep, wolves, alpacas, and even miniature horses. And the landscape, from what I've seen in imagery, looks very close to a lot of West Coast farms and residential areas. The type of terrain that, our local Bigfoot would definitely thrive in. It definitely reminds me of more like the, parts of British Columbia, and then a lot of just adjacent to the West Coast, the plains, you could say. Now, through a lot of research, and aside from a few reports that detail the specifics of an encounter, many occurrences are prominently unobtainable or devoid of being online to find, and this only adds to the rarity of these sightings for the Albatwitch. With many cryptid sightings, you have to distinguish, is it a case of pareidolia? Lights playing tricks on your eyes, seeing something that isn't there, kind of like how you might see a front of a car and distinguish a face on it. It's also worth saying that self-denial of the actual cryptid sighting is a more emotionally comforting avenue to pursue than accepting any shape of reality post-cryptid encounter. This is a more common thing for people than most may realize, and to which there is merit. We're raised and brought up in a singular way of thinking, and anything outside of the norm that compromises that way of life or the way others view you is extremely powerful to somebody. Stacking that with seeing something that shouldn't exist, you have a majority of people that keep it bottled up and refuse to talk about it. It's always one thing to experience it out on the road or near a frequented path in your vehicle or in a group, places that are relatively close to human roads, campsites, populated areas that people kind of are drawn to. But these cryptids aren't limited, as we know, to appearing in these spots, and the rare factor for these really obscure creatures stems from them living in the more remote regions, and to tie that together, some people like hunters who venture into these remote areas are the prime ones who are set to see these things. But again, often bundle them up and keep them a secret. Truckers are also susceptible to seeing and having these encounters as well, driving in more remote areas of the country. But when you're brought up in a specific lifestyle, tough and hiking through the woods and everything, you aren't going to be very opening and upfront about something like this. And it's still a very prominent thing. A lot of the individuals that go out hunting and such were, big, strong men kind of stereotype put out there. You got to bottle up your thoughts and everything and keep your emotions in check. And it's just, it's still around today. And I think that is a very significant thing that affects a lot of people that experience these things. They don't want to be seen as being, I don't want to say weak, that's a horrible label to put on someone, but they don't want to be seen as different or crazy. And that's totally understandable. Another thing that I was trying to dive into to tribute to the rarity of the Albatwitch encounters is that they were actually driven to near extinction, as the legends go, in the later years of the 19th century. Now, I dug and I couldn't find what you could really attribute to this as to why they were going extinct. I imagine, like your regular general Bigfoot or Sasquatch, it's human expansion and development and pushing them back further and further into the more remote parts of the country. So once sightings started back up again in the 1900s, the late 1900s, this cryptid again began stirring up and becoming a prominent cryptid once more. So let's explore a few more sightings that have occurred in more recent years with this little Bigfoot. In Bainbridge, Pennsylvania, a witness reported that during the summer, they were out with their two sisters and a friend, all parked with their camper trailers at one of the camps, and this is again for the whole summer, not just a week-long period. So they had to do a lot of supply runs by walking out towards the nearest town, getting supplies, bringing it all back to camp. And one day, this individual found themselves alone at camp, and with one of their friends having a cookout in Bainbridge, they decided that they'd walk a trail out there to go check it out, but not knowing really anyone that was around at the gathering, they decided to walk back towards the camp to wait for their sisters as they had formed plans for later on. And it was during this walk back, as it was getting closer to dusk, this person started to realize something was afoot here. And again, they noted each side of the trail was wooded. 30 yards to the left through the woods was the river, and 30 yards to the right was the railroad tracks, to which beyond that was just more woods. Then all of a sudden, clear as day, What they referred to as a kid Bigfoot at the time came running from the river, ran right over the trail 15 feet in front of them, and then leaped over some tall bushes towards the tracks before disappearing into the woods. Now, it appeared to be around 4 feet tall, covered in hair from top to bottom, and moved just like a human would. What was described years afterwards as a kid Bigfoot, in retrospect, once they learned about the Albatwitch, now they were able to identify it as being just that. I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break now, and then we'll be right back with some more encounters. And we're back. So, another sighting at Bainbridge. While driving, a witness saw a creature crouch down in a field near Nisley Vineyards in the early dawn. They turned the car around to go back and see it, but only saw it just as it was leaping up and make a run for the woods. In Halem, Pennsylvania, a creature was reportedly in a tree behind the witness's home, described almost as a flying monkey from The Wizard of Oz, again with yellow eyes, and moved unbelievably quick once they shined the flashlight on it. Harvey's Lake, witnesses report seeing what looked like a monkey in a tree, but had yellow eyes. It always comes back down to the eyes. It's fascinating. But as far as sightings go, that was just a little bit of the ones that I was able to really dig up. And it seems the Albatwitch has, again, a lot of information that isn't super well known. But if you happen to have seen a smaller Bigfoot, maybe it really wasn't a juvenile one, but in reality, this similar variant cryptid. It's hard to tell the difference unless you get a good look at the few distinguished features like its neck, general physique, but that's easier said than done. Now, Pennsylvania is the third highest count for Bigfoot sightings in the United States. The first official documented newspaper report of a wild man, which is what they called them back then in the state, was in 1838 up in Bridgewater Township in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania near the Poconos. The total number of sightings so far in Pennsylvania has clocked in at around 1,340 so far, with Washington still being in the lead with around 2,032 sightings, and California in at second with 1,697 sightings. And like many other cryptids that have turned their local towns into tourist hotspots, the Albatwitch Day is a very real thing for the folks in Columbia. Similar things have occurred with the Mothman, and we're even subject to it here in Canada with the Ogopogo. And it's a fun time to help spread awareness of these cryptids. So if you are in that general area of Columbia, take a look online and see what you can find. There should be a festival of sorts that kind of kicks off every year and celebrates. Now, moving on from that, I've talked about these little guys before, but Pennsylvania is certainly subject to gnome activity. And now I'm not saying that's what these things are. I do believe in gnomes myself. I'm primarily using this as an example that little cryptids do exist out there. In the US state, gnomes have been seen all over the place, in areas that Bigfoot themselves are caught wandering around in as well. While it's been reported that the Albatwitch resides mostly in trees and is caught running around on the ground, we can't dismiss the possibility that they don't sometimes bunker down underground. Using what we know about Bigfoot and other hominid cryptids, even gnomes, particularly with tunnels, I like to lump in certain mannerisms with this cryptid, including tunnel networks. Pennsylvania has a massive amount of caves, with many being tourist hotspots. There's well over 1,000 privately mapped caverns across the state. So maybe by day they travel through caves, and by night they emerge and travel through the trees. The area of Chickies Rock is the home base, you could say, throughout history and in some parts still today. However, like I said, through nearing extinction, that was according to legend, and now having sightings spreading into the surrounding areas, they have the ability to stealthily evade and push out from their former hiding spots. Now, how is that possible? Like I mentioned, many a time over, cave systems are a great way of doing that. Underground highways is what I like to refer them as. And if you take a small, super lanky, 4 to 5 foot tall hominid, then it could easily excel at squeezing through small tunnels and passageways to emerge into new areas. However, that's all my own speculation, and again, shares no concrete evidence to support it. Now, looking back at Chickies Rock, where the creatures supposedly live, it does happen to have a frequent amount of strange sights and sounds in the sites we've talked about, obviously, and on top of the Albatwitch sightings, many noises like that of a whip cracking can be heard in the woods at night. Possibly it could be from swinging from branch to branch or these branches snapping off and breaking. We know that some people report seeing Sasquatch usually break sticks out in the woods and make all kinds of noises. We've all heard the samurai sounds, the chattering. And if you haven't, definitely go check that out. So to sort of bottle off everything up that we've talked about, I'm just going to touch upon one last thing here, which is the apples. It seems to be a prominent component to the Albatwitch. And what also happens to love animals? Sasquatch. Now, of course, I can't confirm anything by saying that. I haven't literally seen with my own eyes a Bigfoot eating an apple, but I do believe they are omnivores like ourselves. I do recall many encounters of people leaving apples out and they get taken and eaten. Again, omnivores I say because often reports are they're chasing a deer, they're coordinating and building a tactic around capturing one to eat. And again, hunters have reported seeing them actually eating the meat, just as people have said that they're taking the apples and eating the fruits and such. So that's why I attribute it to being an omnivore. And again, who doesn't really love a good apple? I'm a Granny Smith man myself. I like a little bit of sourness, but to each his own. So while the cores don't often make their way being hurled back at the person, that trait seems to be exclusively to the Albatwitch. But to sum everything up, we have a non-juvenile hairy hominid. Non-juvenile meaning 4 to 5 feet tall is its regular size maturity, relatively similar diet, more in line with its physical attributes for the eastern side of the continent in terms of Bigfoot sightings, yellow eyes, and frequent use of trees. Is this a type of wild man or Sasquatch like the skunk ape or a yeti? Or does it come down to being an actual young Bigfoot? Maybe a prominent mating spot for Sasquatch and it results in frequent juvenile sightings. That's an example we've seen many a time in the animal kingdom. Reasons to move might be to find more food or simply the conditions are more favorable for breeding. Whilst I've never been to Pennsylvania myself, it's clearly a hotspot for cryptid and UFO occurrences both. I mean, just pop on the Google and do a quick search. You'll see so many other cryptids and mythological creatures, paranormal and UFO things, all attributed to this American state. And we do have reports actually that Bigfoot can migrate. Not necessarily for the seasons particularly, like weather, snow, rain, all that kind of stuff, but primarily for the food. And I myself have heard of accounts of the group males traveling miles and miles a day to go out to gather and hunt, and their territories can sometimes seem to spread far greater lengths than many most realize. So I'm curious what you all think of the Albatwitch. And I do hope this episode proved helpful for anyone wanting to learn and try and understand this cryptid a little bit more. Quite possibly, like the encounter I listed, maybe you've had an experience and called it a kid Bigfoot, but now you can hopefully attribute it to being the Albatwitch if it is indeed its own separate being. That being said, I know I have equated a lot of the Bigfoot stuff and used it to kind of further the exploration with the Albatwitch, but that's just, like I mentioned prior, using something that we kind of have a little bit more insight to and use it as a branching into this that has not really a lot of depth to it. And judging from everything that I've been able to find, a lot of the things just seem to go and fall in line with that of a Bigfoot due to the eyes specifically. And again, it's a hairy hominid, but sometimes these Bigfoot encounters aren't just Bigfoot due to other unforeseen and inexplicable circumstances. So it's helpful to dig a little bit and see what, how, or even if any of these things share similarity or common ground. Are they somehow associated with us? Or maybe they're more closely in line with being a Bigfoot or a skunk ape or something like that. But that's where I'm going to end it here. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was definitely a lot of fun looking into this and being able to research the festival and just the people behind looking into these Albatwitches that are existing out there, which it seems like there's definitely more than one that have made a comeback and have resurfaced over the past few years after, as I said, nearly going extinct. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. You can reach us at cryptidclues@gmail.com. And find us on our social media channels as well, or on our website, CryptidClues.ca. We got a lot of cool things on the itinerary coming up, me and Reuben. We got some cool topics, actually, we're going to be diving into for some new main episodes, as well as we near our 50th episode. So me and him are going to try and figure out something kind of fun and cool to do for that. And again, our 1 year is coming up too, which I can't believe. So all around, we're just nearing a whole area of celebrations for the show. And again, we can't thank you enough for supporting us as we've come so far now into this amazing journey. And we have so many more things that we're going to be talking about and exploring, and just really trying to uncover more information to help not only ourselves learn, but help share this information with you guys too, so you all can learn as well. So until next time, stay safe and take care. Thank you.